welcome to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast, where we are always on the level. We're your hosts, Brother Samuel.
And Brother Gaberial.
And we're just hardworking Masons trying to find our place in this fraternity. Craftsman, have you ever sat down and thought, man, it is just going to take me all eternity to make these lessons that I've learned in this fraternity impact my life? I'm not going to see the effects of being a Mason for years. Well, today, Craftsman, we're going to introduce you to a man who in 2 short years has taken the lessons of Masonry and has started to make them an integral part of his everyday life. And he also happens to be a very special person to Brother Gaberial.
So, Craftsman, as you've heard me mention before in some of our previous episodes, my father, also Brother Fawcett, is someone I hold very near and dear to me. And I hope after tonight, with this interview, that you'll come to appreciate him as a Mason and as a brother as much as I do. So, Craftsman, I hope you'll enjoy it, and I think we're going to get right into it tonight. And tonight, Craftsman, I hope you'll enjoy the interview we have coming for you, because I have the honor and privilege of interviewing Brother Daniel Fawcett, my father, from Finley Lodge 227. Welcome to the podcast, Father Brother.
Thank you, brother son.
Craftsman, I really hope that this will be a great interview for you guys tonight, because my father is the person I probably most respect and love in the world. So I'm other than my son. No offense, brother.
No, none taken. I understand that.
So I think we'll get right into it if you're okay with that.
That sounds good to me.
Perfect. So, how long have you been a Mason?
I have to think about that, actually, because, let's see, I was raised in 2022, but it was during the craziness of the thing, the thing that will not be mentioned, let's say.
The Great Cluster?
Yes.
That was...
Yes. It was during all of the lockdowns and everything.
Of the second millennium.
Yes. It was the October of that craziness. And that, my goodness, time really has flown by.
Yeah, I remember most entered apprentices and fellow crafts during the 2020, 21, and even some of the 22. It was rough adjustments trying to get degrees done and get things taken care of, because for a while we couldn't do in-person meetings. And if we did, they weren't for degree work. They were for other stuff. And socially distanced is kind of hard to do a Master Mason degree and a Fellcraft degree and an entered apprentice degree.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, I guess we'll say that your Masonic journey began in, let's say, late 2020, early 21.
That's correct.
So where did you first come into contact with Freemasonry? Was it through me? Was it through studies before I was even born? Or how did that kind of come about?
Do you want the full story?
Absolutely. I think the Craftsman will love this.
Okay. The very earliest encounter that I had was, I must have been 5 years old, and my grandmother and her second husband, they lived in California. We didn't get to see them very often. And they came out to New York to see us. And I remember being fascinated by the ring that this gentleman had. And I asked about it, and he said, well, it's a group that I belong to. It's a brotherhood that I belong to. And I was fascinated by it. And every now and then I would see him again. He would have the ring on. I would ask him about it. And, he would say a little bit more as I got older. But I think he passed on when I was 10. So didn't really encounter him again. But being a pretty typical 1980s nerd, very, very involved in Dungeons and Dragons, very involved in video games, very involved in all of those things. And sooner or later, you start going to the library, finding all the weird books, finding all the strange histories, whether it's the conspiratorial stuff or it's the esoteric stuff, you find all these weird people in history. And sooner or later, I started running across some conspiracy books and, talking about, well, the Freemasons or the boogeyman, And so I encountered that a few times and just sort of tucked that away in the back of my mind. Now, you have to also remember, though, that I was raised Roman Catholic, and this is when I still thought that I might become a Franciscan friar. And yeah, there were an awful lot of people who, anytime I would say something about, I had heard about this Freemasonry and, oh well, you don't want to mess around with that. You should look into the Knights of Columbus or whatever it happened to be. And then I just kind of had that tucked away in the back of my mind, kind of forgot about it. And then the years went by, you came along, and one of your friends introduced you to De Molay. And immediately something clicked, and I said, oh yeah, isn't that like Junior Masons? And I was, quite intrigued by that. I saw you go through your De Molay journey, and it was powerful. It was powerful watching you go through your De Molay journey. I saw you mature. I saw you become much more confident.
Aw, thank you. Thank you, brother, father. I appreciate that.
You're welcome, brother, son. But I did. I saw you change in a lot of fascinating ways. And then you continued with Freemasonry. And it made a huge impact on you. And I could tell. And I remember saying to myself at that point, if it did that for him, I wonder if it could do the same for me. There were a lot of areas of growth that I wanted to explore that I hadn't really had a chance to. And so it all came back around.
Well, first off, I really appreciate you saying all those things. It feels really good. And I must say, as this may be your son talking, but I never thought that you needed much growth or maturing in other avenues. You always seemed as like the ideal mature professor to me. But no, I don't think you've ever told me that story from when you were a kid.
Oh yeah,
I don't think you ever told me that. And that's kind of interesting how you had something so early with that, and I didn't even know that, and I wound up joining Freemasonry.
Yes. And your grandpa Fawcett, no, it was your great-grandpa Fawcett. I don't think he was involved in Freemasonry. I think he might have been an odd fellow.
Okay.
But it was one of those things that had always been like hovering in the back of my experience. And I remember When I was growing up and I was involved in musical theater, I was in the Syracuse Opera Company. One of the things that we did, we had a lot of our rehearsals were held at, it was an old Masonic lodge that had been turned into like an arts and performance space.
Well, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. And so I saw a lot of the same imagery and symbolism that I'd encountered when I was young, seeing it again, running into it over and over. And there were actually there were an awful lot of Masonic monuments, lodges, former lodges, and so on throughout the Syracuse area. So you would, you couldn't throw a stone without seeing, something that had Masonic imagery on it.
Well, Syracuse is kind of a large city compared to what we're used to dealing with around here. So it's true. Of course, there's going to be a lot of Masonic activity in larger cities. But so other than seeing me going through it, and I really appreciate that it helped kind of re-instill your interest a little bit, but what specifically made you take the leap? Like, other than seeing your son go through it and what the benefits it gave me for it, what was your thought process? What really made you think, I'm gonna take the leap now?
The whole idea of, making good men better, making us better men, that spoke to me on some deep level. I had gone through a few things throughout my life that had really made me, and again, this is probably something that I haven't said to you before. Several things had happened throughout my life that made me really question, what kind of a man am I? And when I first started chatting with some of the folks down in Findlay Lodge, and that the whole idea of, building better men, that spoke to me on some level that I hadn't really understood at the time was important to me. And it really caught me, drew me in, and that's where my journey really kind of set fire.
Well, I like that. That's really powerful, and I think that's a great example of how good and important the draw of Freemasonry is to already good and upstanding men like yourself.
Well, thank you.
So, was there anything that really stuck out for you, though, when you were starting to become a Mason? Was there something that you didn't know that you learned, or were there people that you didn't know were Masons that you met, or was there something that was really impactful to you when you first petitioned your lodge?
I think the thing that really that caught my attention and drew me in was suddenly a lot of the various imagery that I had seen throughout the years, throughout my various library studies and various places throughout Syracuse as I was growing up. A lot of the imagery, it started to come together in a way that suddenly made much more sense. It's like, oh, there's a language behind these symbols. And as you know, I've always been fascinated with languages. I've always been fascinated with understanding how things work on that sort of the level of meaning, and the level of meaning that's right underneath the surface. How do we find those deeper meanings of things? And the fact that Freemasonry was using a lot of images that I already understood, already had in my, mental index, using them in ways that I hadn't understood before. Particularly, you see the square and compass all over the place. You see it very, very often. But we're never really, it's just one of those images that you see over and over, and you just don't really think about it because of how common it is in certain situations. Really getting to understand what's the purpose. What is the meaning that we have for these images? That scratched an itch in my brain that it's an itch that doesn't normally get scratched. So it was really terrific to encounter that.
I like that. You are, through your Masonic travels, you're going to love talking with some of the other educators in the fraternity, and you're going to like going to educational lodges and educational seminars and broadening your Masonic horizons. I believe would be the apt term for that.
Yes. It's definitely something I'm excited about.
Good. I'm very glad about that. So we're going to start getting into a little more thought-provoking questions, which, as someone who is, compared to myself, which is interesting because you are my elder, I am your Masonic elder. I've been in the fraternity a lot longer than you have.
Yes.
And I've experienced a few more types of things. But I really like the idea that you have hit the ground running with your Masonic career and really broadened your Masonic horizons, because you already came into the fraternity as an educator, as someone who seeks knowledge and wants to know more. And it's amazing watching you develop your own separate Masonic career from me. You have a completely different Masonic career. You have an academic, learning and seeking knowledge Masonic career. I went right into administration and officer line duties and everything, and now I'm transitioning into the knowledge seeking and the mentorship and everything else. So it's very, I've loved to see that grow in you.
Well, I have to say, I've been fascinated to see that as well, because a lot of people say that you and I are very much alike, and we are very much alike. But when you jumped into the line, I remember, a few people down in Findlay Lodge would say, hey, when are we going to get you in the line? And my immediate thought was, oh, no, you don't want me in the line. So to see you really jump in and take it so seriously and to be so motivated by it, and really want to bring something of yourself to the administrative positions, and moving through the line. And I have to say, one of the proudest moments, even though you are my Masonic elder, one of my proudest moments was seeing you brought in as worshipful master of Genoa Lodge. That just it delighted me, because I always knew that you had leadership potential, you had leadership abilities. It was great to see you really understand that about yourself.
Well, I really appreciate that. And this interview has turned into the Appreciate Brother Gaberial podcast episode, hasn't it?
Well, it has, but that's okay with me, because I'm going to say something that I've said to you in private a few times, and I hope you don't mind that I'm now saying it in public. One of the best things that a father can hope for his son is to see his son be a better man. You are a better man than I am, and it warms my heart. I have done my job as a father because you have surpassed me.
Well, I really appreciate that, but I want to tie into something we are both working on, and that's both becoming better men together.
Yes.
Now.
Absolutely.
As brothers, you did your job as a father, and I very much appreciate that, but now we get to do our job as brothers together.
Yes.
In the fraternity as well.
Yes, absolutely. And that's something that, that's another reason why the fraternity was important to me, why, becoming a brother mattered to me. Because I knew that it would be a way for me to grow as a man alongside of you growing as a man, and then to see the way we can interact and help other men and be helped by other men, and everyone lifting one another up. It's the old saying that a rising tide lifts all ships. That's what belonging to Freemasonry is for me. It is the rising tide.
Well, I love that. And I love the fact that you've set such a great tone, and I hope that the next couple of questions don't take away from that tone too much. Because we've got a couple thought-provoking questions, a couple good questions, but a question that involves advice and of that sort of nature. So the first one that I have is, you've been able to experience the fraternity for a few years now. And so my question would be to you is, if there would be something that you could maybe change about the fraternity or adjust, not in terms of our ritual, obviously, or not in terms of like positions or dogma or any of our traditions, but something maybe in modes of communication or logistics, or even things that you think that we should be doing in the community that you're not. Is there something that strikes you? Because I know Finley Lodge is such a active and engaged in the community lodge, and you guys have such a good brotherhood connection too outside of your lodge meetings. It's sometimes hard to come up with critiques of a lodge that's so that stands on such a good footing like your lodge.
It does. But there are always areas in any institution that can be improved. And I think one of the areas is, we see it in so many lodges, even, a lodge like Findlay Lodge that is so active and does have a pretty substantial membership, is on any given, stated meeting, you look around and, so many empty seats. And I really would love to see more outreach, although I understand why there is not. But I think another thing that I would love to see is much more of an attempt to speak to the different kinds of Masons that are out there. And what I mean by that is, like we already touched on, you jumped into the line and you jumped into leadership, and it's wonderful. I think there are a lot of people like me who, we would really love to talk about some of the weird stuff, some of the history, some of the stranger, and sometimes forgotten byways of Freemasonry. There are various rites that have just over the generations come and gone, in various countries, in various places. There's several different German lodges that came and went in the mid 1800s up into the early 1900s. They just came and went, and various rites that have emerged or attempted to emerge and then fizzled out. It would be fascinating to really dig into those with people. And I know that there are some lodges that do this kind of work. But there was one time I had a conversation with someone at Findlay Lodge, and it was after one of the lodge meetings, and I talked about, this is a book that I've really enjoyed, and the brother that I was speaking with said, oh, I read that book too, and I mentioned something about, we ought to try and get a book club going. And he said, we've tried that, and it never really takes off. And just inside, I felt myself go, oh, really? That these things have been tried and they didn't catch fire. I'd really love to see some of these more, and I don't want to say esoteric. That sounds all, frou-frou and, ooh, esoteric. No, but some of the lesser known elements within Freemasonry, some of the unusual history that has been forgotten. I remember the first time encountering, encountering that some of, let's so mote it be, that's Middle English. That's Middle English. I love Middle English. I read Middle English poetry. I adore Middle English. Let's study that. How did that come? Because 1717 and the formation of the Grand Lodge, Middle English was long gone by then. People weren't speaking Middle English by that point. They were speaking early modern English. They were even further along than early modern English. Nobody was saying, so mote it be anymore. So why do we have that? I would love to be able to do a deep dive into studying those sorts of details.
It sounds like someday your officer position is going to be education officer. It sounds like that's what's in your future.
Nobody wants me as an officer. No, really, nobody wants me as an officer because I'm one of those, I'm a very big picture person. Details can slip away from me very quickly. No,
as they do for me.
Yeah, but you have the habits of mind that even if they do slip away, you can correct yourself midstream. You can listen to the people around you who are saying, "Hey, wait a minute. What about this?" Me, I'm so lost in the clouds because of the big picture things that I've just like sunk my teeth into, and I'm going after that, and I'm chewing on that bone, and people are trying to get my attention with the details, and I'm fixated. I'm fixated, but I'm fixated on the big idea. So.
Well, there'll obviously always be things for you to do with that kind of mindset, which will obviously work out perfect. But
and that's the sort of thing I'd love to. I would love to assist in any sort of way that I can without needing to be the sort of detail oriented person.
And we will explore it together, and we'll find a great spot for it. So, as we have alluded to a little bit already with some of the stuff we've been talking about, what is something, maybe the one thing that you really love about the fraternity?
the one thing that I really love about the fraternity is the fact that it is a fraternity, the fact that we are brothers. I remember before coming in, you had said something to me that once I begin my Masonic journey, I'm going to find, thousands, hundreds of thousands of brothers that I never knew I had. And I remember thinking, oh, that's a really nice idea. But then the first time I actually felt that, it's different being told and really feeling it for the first time.
Absolutely. And that's why when I'm telling people about Masonry, when I try to explain to people what Masonry really is versus what they've heard or read in conspiracy theories or just assumed because they don't know how to read between the lines or read beneath the surface, is trying to get that idea across of we don't just say that, we aspire to that. We try to make that the reality of the world. And I think, especially nowadays, I think that's a foreign concept to a lot of people, is that we're actually trying to do what we've set out to do, which is establish a brotherhood of men who, when you meet a Mason in the wild, you're assuming with almost 99% confidence that he feels the same way about you that you feel about him, because you're trusting in your oaths as a Mason and you're trusting in the teachings of the fraternity.
Yes.
That when you meet this person you've never met before, you can shake their hand as a brother and know this is a man who's been through the same degrees as I have. This is a man who shares a similar outlook on the rest of the world as I do. And not because we grew up at the same school or anything, but because we've been through exactly the same thing.
Yes. To me, I think that's one of the most powerful things is being able to understand that it doesn't matter, that I have a bunch of academic, bona fides behind me, and somebody else might not, or that someone else in the lodge has a medical degree. Another person drives truck for a living. None of those things matter in terms of the way they matter outside of the lodge for some people. There are a lot of people who will make assumptions about me because of my academic background and, because of the way I speak and so on and so forth, that people within the lodge, they don't make the same assumptions. They instead see me as a brother. They see me as someone that they don't make guesses about, what I think about political issues or social issues or where you're going to fall on this, that, or the other thing that's such a hot button topic right now. No. When we're in the lodge, none of that matters. None of that is relevant. What is relevant is that we are brothers who have experienced the same degree work. We've had the same experiences within the lodge, and that ties us together in a way that is it's unique, and it's something that I didn't really experience in any other environment.
I think that's very profound.
Well, thank you.
It's a great answer to that question. So, you have brought it up quite a bit so far, but I'm going to still ask you the question. What does being a Mason mean to you in a I don't want to say short sense because that's not what I'm asking. In a, maybe not like footnotes, but if you had to maybe like give a presentation to your students, not like a bullet point presentation, but still kind of a presentation as to what being a Mason means to you, what do you think you would say?
Well, I think I'd start off with being a Mason means being a better man than I was yesterday. And one of the things, okay. I used to have really terrible road rage. Just really awful.
I remember.
Yes, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. And it's one of the few times that my temper would really get out of bounds. And as I was going through my Masonic journey, there was one day someone cut me off in traffic, and I was about to, and I was about to do the standard Dan Fawcett road rage kind of moment. And then I thought, wait a second. I'm wearing my hat. I'm wearing my hat with my Masonic emblem on it. What happens if somebody sees me just, giving someone the finger and riding their tail and blaring my horn and obviously screaming at them, and they see, they look closely enough and they see, oh, well, if that's what those Masons are like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. I realized in that moment that any time I'm presenting myself in any way as being connected to the brotherhood, to the lodge, to my brethren, if I do even the slightest thing that could bring shame to any of them, I'm not building them up. I'm tearing them down. And I can't let myself do that. I can't let myself be that person. And that forces me to think more deeply about, what am I doing? How are my behaviors reflecting upon the lodge, the brotherhood, and each and every one of my brothers? I don't want anyone thinking poorly of one of my brothers because of something that I did.
That was not the answer I was expecting. And it's far more impactful and powerful of an answer than I was expecting in that. And I really appreciate that. I think that's exactly what I like about your Masonic journey, is that it has been so impactful and self-reflective right from the get-go. And that's something that I admire, because it has taken me actually a little bit longer than it did with you to turn my Masonic journey into more of a reflective, self-teaching one, rather than I want to show the world how good of a man Freemasonry has made me, into a using the principles of Freemasonry to improve myself personally, for the sake of improving myself personally. And I think that's just impactful. But brother, you seem to have some extra thoughts on that.
Well, one of the things that I was going to say is, I think fathers and sons, it's very interesting to me to see some of the changes that have happened in you over the years. Fathers and sons share an awful lot, but there's always that element, that the sons want to move away from, sons want to distinguish themselves. Sons want to be distinct men in their own right. And I think that self-reflection has always been in you. And it's one of those things that you've said, you know what? No. My dad does that. And he can get lost sometimes. I don't think I want to necessarily go down that road. But it is there in you. It's just there in different ways.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course.
And Craftsman, I hope you've enjoyed this interview as much as I have, because Brother Father, I think I'm having a great time with this interview.
I'm having a great time with this interview, Brother Son.
I think I'm going to get name cards made for us for our lodges, and it's going to say Brother Father Brother on yours, and it's going to say Son Brother or Brother Son on mine.
That sounds good. I like that.
Craftsman, we're going to take a short break here, and we hope you'll rejoin us for the rest of the interview.
Hey there, Craftsman. Brother Samuel here.
Hey, Craftsman. Brother Gaberial here.
We hope you've enjoyed listening to our content as much as we have enjoyed making it for you. It really has been a blast. But we do have a request for you if you've gotten any kind of a gain out of listening to our show.
Craftsman, we'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to fill out a survey connected to our podcast. In the description of the episode, you'll find a link to that survey. After you complete the survey, which will have sections for questions, comments, as well as answering all the questions, 2 lucky winners who complete the survey will win a free Mason gear hat. And we all know that they're quality Mason gear hats.
Oh, and just so you know, I picked them. They're hats I would wear, so you know they're pretty cool.
So thank you, Craftsman. If you have the time within the length of your cable tow, we'd really appreciate to hear from you.
And now, back to the interview.
And welcome back, Craftsman, to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast. Thank you for rejoining us. Joining us again is Brother Father, Daniel Fawcett.
Hello, Brother Son.
And Craftsman, I think we've had such a good time with this interview, we're going to get right back into it. So, Brother Father.
So, Brother Son.
I know what you do for a living, but tell the rest of the listeners what it is that you do for a living.
Are you sure you know what I do for a living?
You know, sometimes I just think that you live in a hand-built wooden shack growing tomatoes and making alchemical potions.
Yes. But what I really
what do you do for your normal vocation?
My normal vocation, I'm in education. I'm a high school English teacher.
Okay. Do you like that?
I love it. I love it. I didn't love it when I first went into it. I enjoyed it. I didn't love it. I thought I was supposed to be a professor. So I went back to get my graduate degree and thought I was going to keep on going, get my PhD, wind up at the university level. Hated the PhD process. Came very close to the end, but just couldn't white knuckle my way through it, and realized I'm racking up a whole bunch of debt for something that I don't want to do and that I probably won't be able to find a job in. So I stopped and I looked around and I said, well, you know, I have the proper credentials. I have the proper education. I'll just go back and get into teaching and get back into that until I find what my real calling in life is. Went back and started teaching at the high school level again and really fell in love with it. I mean, I loved it. I liked it the first time around. I fell in love with it when I came back to it.
Good. Well, I'm glad that you have something that you like doing.
Yes.
So, do you, when it comes to teaching, especially with high school kids, because that's probably real difficult at times, does it feel like being a Mason makes that easier, or does it make your profession better with what you know through your teachings?
For me, it's very similar to what we were talking about before with the road rage and that moment of realization that, what I do is a reflection on my brethren. And once I had that realization, it kind of branched out from there, that what I do is a reflection on everyone that is around me, everyone that I associate with. If I do something that I'm ashamed of, if I do something that I'm not proud of, that has ripple effects. And that reflects on other people that I care about, that has ripple effects on my family, on my brothers. And as a result, it puts me in a position where I have become, let's just say I have become much more careful about how I present myself. Because I think there was a time when I really would have said to the world, what you see is what you get. And if you don't like it, hey, I'm sorry, but meh. And I have come to see that instead, when I do something to turn a student off to education, I have harmed them. I've harmed them as a person. If I make them feel like the educational process is painful, I've harmed my fellow teachers, because they're going to carry that dislike of education into math or into whatever class they go to next. So the realization that I had about Freemasonry and my reflections on the brethren and the lodge, it applies to my academic world as well.
I like that. Do your students know that you're a Mason?
I don't hide it. I don't advertise it necessarily, but there was one time that it actually did come up. It was in my Gothic literature class. One of the stories, one of the Poe stories, Cask of Amontillado, the character makes a comment about being a Mason. And I don't even remember what I said. It was something very offhand, but it was about belonging to the Brotherhood. And then some students had questions for me about that, and I answered a few of them and said, okay, but now let's return to Poe. But yeah, so it's not something that I necessarily advertise, but I don't shy away from it either.
You're kind of more in the, not quite old fashioned, but you're kind of more in the how they used to do it kind of category of like not placking it all over your vehicles, not wearing not having a big square and compass flag outside your house and everything. Yes, of course, you and I often wear our hats, but I like to put the square and compass everywhere and on everything, whereas you are very mild-mannered Clark Kenty about it.
So I do, I do like to have the glasses on, but every now and then I'll step into the phone booth and take the glasses off, so to speak.
So I've gotten to obviously grow up with you and see you in your daily life. And I only saw the good things. But do you have Masonry help you in your personal life as well as in your home life? Like, you've talked about how you use the principles out in the world? Do you use it at home too?
Absolutely. I remember having a conversation with someone who was asking me a little bit about Freemasonry, and she was concerned. The woman who cuts my hair, and she was concerned. Well, it's a men's only organization, and isn't there something wrong with that in this modern world? And I said, well, one of the things that we do is we concentrate on being better men. And that means also being better fathers, better husbands, boyfriends, sons. It means being better to everyone that we encounter. And I do think that it has changed my interactions with people on a daily basis. I think if you were to ask Jackie, my wife, your stepmom, if you were to ask her, I think she would probably say that she has seen positive changes in me.
Good. I like that. And I'm very happy that it has impacted your life so well. And this is interesting because the next question is, do you feel being a Mason has made you a better man? And I'm going to answer that question for you, which is yes. The answer is yes.
Well, thank you.
Because up to this point, you've demonstrated clearly, I think, to both Brother Wilburn and I hope to the listeners, that Freemasonry has had not even a quantifiable impact on your life. It's had just this massive overarching effect on your life that has been nothing but a positive.
Yes, absolutely. You're too young to remember. Some of the brethren will be old enough to remember, but there's this old commercial, and Palmolive, you're soaking in it. And this woman, she had her hands in the dish soap, and it was making her skin. But this whole idea of soaking in it. Sorry, I had to bring up a 1970s pop culture reference to get here. But I do feel like, in a certain way, Freemasonry is just something that I've been soaking in. It really has entered into every area of my life. It's made me a better teacher. It's made me a better husband, a better father, a better grandfather. So yes, I feel very pleased with the influence that Freemasonry has had on my life, and I'm glad to know that you see it as well.
I do. I really do.
Well, thank you.
We're going to start finalizing and wrapping up the interview.
Okay.
And so these questions are really nice questions, and I'm interested to see your answers for some of these, because we get so many different thought-provoking answers, and I'm very interested to see what you'll come up with on this one.
Since you said wrapping up, is this like the lightning round? I have to
No.
Okay.
We don't do speed Jeopardy on the Third Degree Masonic Podcast.
We say that for Brother Hall. He does that on his show.
Yeah.
Well, as many of the listeners can probably tell, I really don't do lightning rounds.
I believe the listeners will tell very much where I get my mannerisms and speech patterns from. I think it's been very clear that it's the apple doesn't fall far
from the tree.
The apple not falleth very fareth frometh theeth treeth. to appease your Middle England.
Oh, I could correct you, but that's okay. I won't.
So, brother, father.
So, brother, son.
Do you have a Masonic idol or hero? This can be a contemporary hero, a folk hero, or someone we may even idolize as exemplifying Masonic values, but maybe a historical character whose real membership in Masonry may be up for debate. But
oh my goodness. Oh, what a good question. There are kind of too many for me to really narrow it down to just one. Before I even really started my Masonic journey, one of the writers that I encountered was Manly P. Hall. He wrote a heck of a lot about Freemasonry. So, he would be one of my, kind of intellectual academic heroes. Benjamin Franklin. I mean, how you can't go wrong with Franklin.
Okay, no, this is your interview. I won't interject.
No, I'm interested. I'm really interested.
So, Brother Wilburn, you really like Brother Benjamin Franklin, and you think that you would like to venerate him more so than Brother Washington. And a lot of people, I think, put Ben Franklin on a pedestal, and I think he would be, I think he would appreciate that, but also at the same time, he strikes me as a man who has enough intelligence and humility to recognize that he may not be that deserving of being on that pedestal, not because he didn't do great things with his life, but because he was a man who struggled with exemplifying certain virtues.
He was a deeply flawed man.
Yes,
he was.
But I think he would have enough intelligence and humility to be able to admit that, which is why at the same time, I like him being a main figurehead of the fraternity, because he understood being a rough ashlar, I think. And I think he, from the writings and contemporary knowledge we have of him, I think he was smart enough and humble enough to recognize that.
I'm trying to remember what the line is from his autobiography, but it's something to the effect of, it was at that moment that I undertook the endeavor of moral perfection. And he always understood that moral perfection was not something that he was going to hit, but that he even made charts for himself. And if you read his autobiography, you can see the charts that he kept. Like, he would go through, and every time he felt like he had shown some sort of virtue, he would knock it off and put a check mark in it in his book. But it was also interesting to see that he was humble enough to realize there are plenty of days that I missed and I did not fill in the check mark here. So, yes, he was a deeply flawed individual, but aren't we all?
Yeah. So who else? 'Cause you were going to have others before I entered my 2 cents into the ring.
Well, obviously, George Washington is towering figure, especially for us.
No offense to our venerated brother Washington, a little cliche, but
yes, absolutely. One who is, let's say, very speculative, particularly since he predates the Grand Lodge. But I have a soft spot for Sir Francis Bacon. And there are a lot of people who would say, well, maybe one of these proto-Masonic organizations. So, goodness, but who else? Oh, darn it. Another very flawed man, but I'm blanking on his name, the author of Morals and Dogma.
Albert Pike.
Albert Pike, thank you. There's another one. Flawed man, but, fascinating figure.
Yes, I very much agree with that. A flawed but very interesting figure.
Yes.
So, well, I like that. Some very interesting answers on that one. Exactly what I would expect. So thank you for that.
Well, of course, my pleasure.
We knew you'd have some interesting ones.
Yes, we knew that one was going to be interesting. So this one, I really like these next two questions. I love ending our interviews with these questions. So if you were to, say, encounter a young man, say 50 years from now, a brand new Master Mason or a man just getting ready to consider putting his petition in, what would you want to tell those future Masons? What advice would you give to a Mason 50, 80, 100 years from now?
Well, I'd tell him, get me home. I'm 100 and something. But in keeping with the spirit of your question, I'm sorry.
Sorry, guys.
I didn't. But I think in keeping with the spirit of your question, I would have to say, goodness, remember that we are a grand institution with a very long history. Wherever you plant your flag as the origin point of Freemasonry, whether the founding of the Grand Lodge or many of our stories that obviously go back much farther. Wherever you plant that flag, we have a very long tradition. This is a venerable institution. We stand on the shoulders of giants. So use that to see farther. Use that not only looking ahead, looking back. Really study what has come before, but always be looking to the future. It's Janus, I believe, the two-faced, the Greco-Roman god who has a face in front so that he can see the future, but also a face in the back so that he can see the past. Keep that in mind. Look to the future, look to opportunities for innovation, but always with one foot planted firmly in the past. Because it is the institutional memory that makes Freemasonry what it is. It's the fact that we can look back to so many great brothers who have come before us, some of whose names we know, some we don't. I mean, there are great men who have been part of this brotherhood whose names we will never know. Take advantage of that. Take advantage of the power, the greatness that comes from the institutional memory, from the long-standing traditions.
I'm almost speechless about that. I think that was, dare I say, beautiful.
Well,
almost.
Thank you. I felt like I was blathering, so.
No, I think that was very powerful. I think that was very to the point.
Nobody has ever accused me of that.
Well, it makes its point.
Okay.
How about that?
Thank you.
So,
Truth speaks for itself.
yes. So, finally, in the same kind of vein, to those Masons 50, 100, 150 years from now, what would you want your legacy to be to them? What would you want to be known for, or what would you like to be thought of as?
That's a really fascinating question. And I'm going to probably expose something that hadn't really talked about with you at any point. I grew up, because of the generation that I grew up in and because of how very privileged I was in the way I grew up, I just assumed I was going to be famous. I was going to be important. I was going to be a famous writer, a famous musician. I was going to be, I was going to be someone. Everybody knew my name. I have come instead to really believe that the greatest legacy I can leave is to not be remembered myself, but for the people around me to carry on the things that I did, the things that I did that mattered, caring for the people around me, trying to make people smile, I try to make everybody's day just a little bit brighter. And if the people around me just have a little bit of that rub off on them, I don't care if people remember my name. I don't care if there's a plaque for me anywhere. And it's, I think 5 years ago, if I had said that, it would have been me trying to sound humble. It would have been disingenuous. Now I really believe it. I don't want my legacy to be one of, hey, that Brother Fawcett was an awesome dude. I want my legacy to be 2, 3, 4 generations from now. Just maybe somebody is a little bit happier, a little bit better off, likes to read a little bit more, feels a little bit better about themselves because of some little piece of positivity that I put into the world. That's one of the legacies that I want. The other legacy that I want is for you to continue your path of being a better man, and for Liam to continue that path. I think those are the legacies that matter to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know what to say other than that.
Well then, maybe that's a good place to draw to a close.
I think so. Craftsman, we really hope that you've liked this interview tonight. I hope you've all enjoyed this episode tonight as much as I have. And remember, Craftsman,
keep your working tools in order and always be on the level.
We'd like to thank you, Craftsman, for listening to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast. If you can find it within the length of your cable tow, to leave us a review or a 5-star review on your favorite streaming service or podcasting platform, we would greatly appreciate it. As always, Craftsman, thank you for joining us on this adventure. We'll talk to you soon.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the Grand Lodge of Ohio, its officers, or any of its jurisdictions. They only reflect those of the hosts or guests.